So I'm going to explain some things to people that you should understand, right? Core method, simple and hard to spot without vigilant per bundle scrutiny, right? Counters or insiders take a genuine bundle of ballots, e.g., 50 votes, mostly for candidate A. They then place a small number of ballots for candidate B at the top and or the bottom of the stack, right? So they back and front it. Count or record the entire bundle as if it was overwhelmingly or entirely for candidate B, when actually it's for candidate A, right? The middle ballots for A are effectively stolen and redistributed without tearing up or discarding ballots. So everyone thinks they're getting rid of ballots and taking away. That's not how they do this, right? You're being misled. This creates plausible deniability. The bundle looks legitimate on a quick scan or high-level audit, especially if observers are kept at distance, which they do when they put the bundles into the middle area, because the observers are back there and they do not allow cameras in there to look at it, right? That needs to be changed as well. But there are ways in which you can put checks in that stop this, right? Scan high level, especially if observers are kept at a distance or the count moves fast. With only a limited number of party agents, even up to 10, right? So you're only allowed to have 10 count agents in there. This is why count agents are so important. And each one must have the bottle to call over the returning officer and say, I'm not happy with this. I want to have a look inside that bundle, right? You must do it, and you must record every time you've done it at the count, because when it goes to the election petition, the court will say, hang on a minute, they've told you all about this. They've requested 5 or 6 times that they weren't happy with that, right? And there is something else I'm going to talk to you about as well, right? So many counting protocols, why it works against standard processes. Many counting protocols rely on batch totals rather than 100% individual ballot verification in real time. Auditors, reviewers often check summary sheets or sample bundles. So the auditors review sample bundles. So they're given the sample bundles and they're given a bit of paper to say, do you want to check this off? This is what the returning officer was saying in the High Court. These are our checks and balances on this system. We audit it, blah, blah, blah. And I asked her the question, are all the people that are doing the count and the auditing, are they from Houghton Borough Council? Do they work for, are they within this constituency? And she said no. Some of them come from St Helens, some of them come from Liverpool, they come from different, because they have been trained in the fraud, right? People need to understand this. It ain't a game, right? Auditors, reviewers often check summary sheets or sample bundles, not every ballot and every stack. Collusion between counters and auditors or intimidated weak oversight. So what they do is try and intimidate you, right? So Labour will get all their people in there and as if they own the count, or Conservative will get in, out of my way, right? As if you're some sort of scum, right? This is where you need to train people, and preferably people that are already auditors and understand, because I'm going to go on to something else here, retail auditing, right? Don't forget, this is a standard type fraud, right? And this is what we're going to get into. So their intimidation of people at the count is what they do, right? And you need to be highly focused, have enough confidence to call foul and say, listen, I've seen this. I want a steward's inquiry on them bundles, blah, 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 blah. There was a guy called Billy Hayward. It happened to him at an event. This happened in a big way in 2009 at the Doncaster election. And they stood up and said, we ain't having this. 5,000 BNP ballots were put in the bundles of the Labour Party, right? So it isn't necessary, but they could have put them in the Green Party. It's just to remove the ballots and change what is the actual real opinion of the nation. That's what they're trying to show, that they're winning. It's a bit like when they made everyone wear masks for COVID, right? It wasn't because it protected you, is they needed a visual of their psychological reframing and their terrorism of the public. They needed seeing evidence that it was working, right? And there was no greater evidence than, people going into a restaurant and taking their mask off to eat and then putting it back on again, or driving around in their car with their windows done up with a mask on, right? There was no greater evidence of idiocy and those people being subjected to hive mind mass hypnosis, right? Well, all of this is about psychology. These people know exactly what. This is one of the reasons why, if you go back to my earliest writings 15 years ago, I said that you should make it a criminal offence to use psychology against the public. If you are a psychologist and you are using your skills politically against the people, you should be sent to prison for life, because that is just as bad as murder, because you're fucking with people's minds. That's why so many people, believe it or not, in and I can't remember the location, but it was near to Wales, loads of young kids committed suicide. Well, the USSR had the highest suicide rate in the world, right? Using psychology against people should be the ultimate in the sentence that you are given, right? So not necessarily hang them, but certainly they should go prison for life for abusing other people's minds, right? So let me get back onto this, why it works against standard processing, etc. Many accounting protocols rely on batch totals rather than 100%. I've gone through that bit. This is not limited to postal mail-in ballots, right? So everyone keeps concentrating on postal or mail-in ballots. That is part of the problem. It's not the biggest part of the problem. The biggest part of the problem is the fraud itself, right? So retail analogy, and this is where any retail businesses out there, retirees, retiree auditors, retiree people that really understand the process of doing an inventory or stock take and the audit of the stock take and understanding this fraud. Them retirees, right, who are experienced, have got the bottle to stand up, who know what they're looking for, know what they're looking at, right? They should be approaching Restore Britain to say, you need to be able to train people in this type of fraud, right? It's not difficult, right? Because they can go and get you tomorrow and you could be called in to do a stock take somewhere and they will say to you, we need to give you 2 days training. And you go, yeah, that's fine. And then you're shown how the fraud works. They will be absolutely terrorized if they know, right, that you're watching for the fraud and that you are prepared to call it out every time you see it at that count, right? And then I'm telling you now, you've got a good chance of winning if you then persuade the people to come out and vote, because they've been demoralized by this fraud, right? It's one of the ways they've demoralized people. So again, retail analogy widely understood. So in other words, the stock take, inventory stock take, and the inventory stock fraud is widely known, right? It's very similar fraud. That's why I'm bringing this up as an analogy. This is why people in Restore Britain need to understand what is going on, right? And it's one of the reasons why Trump was so big on taking these people down for literally defrauding the election, right? Because it is treason, right? So what exactly like inventory stock fraud in business audits, A company and its auditors collude to overstate assets. They show auditors a shelf that looks full, good items on top and bottom, cheap, fake, wrong items, or empties in the middle. They can have empty boxes. It'll have the same weight, and they've checked them, and they think, and it could be a load of, I don't know, rags in the middle boxes of a load of t-shirts, but on the top there's a box, and on the bottom there's a box, and they've got the real t-shirts in, but two other boxes above that, which is double the stock or even the stock, right? It is not t-shirts, right, or whatever it is. Overstate the assets. They show auditors a shelf that looks full, goods on the item top and the bottom, cheap, fake, wrong items, or empties in the middle. Shareholders, voters, are deceived by falsified totals. The fraud is committed by the counters and auditors together, right? Not just low-level staff. So the geezers, the people around the edge of the tables, that when you're at account, they're counting and putting them in the thing. They're not the ones doing the fraud because all of the eyes are on them. It's the people in the middle that you can't see as account agent, which is why you need to have people trained on them, and you need to be able to call it out, right? Demand full visibility and the right to examine both ends and representative middle ballots of every counted bundle. Are you listening to this? Because this is important. Insist on slow enough counting and enough trained agents, observers, so that swaps cannot be hidden. Now, I just want to make sure that you understand this. You're only allowed to have 10, right? They do that for a reason. But if you had two independents that you knew, or the English Constitution Party standing there, which I've said we won't stand against them, but you was there as paper candidates, you would increase Restores Britain's count agents. Let's say you've got two on the ticket, two independents, or the English Constitution Party and an independent. That means you've now got 30 count agents. Right? Listen to what I've just said. And then all of them people are trained in the same way to look for that, and will call it out. You could all wear badges saying that you're supporting Restore Britain, right? But people would know we're not tolerating this fraud. If we stand in an election, this is what we're going to do, right? It creates a massive problem for them, right? Push for video recording of every counting table plus random full bundle audits, not just totals, right? And again, that's what we did in the election call, the petition, and the two judges that we ended up with were swapped out by an abusive process appeal that we won 3-0. But the only reason they've done the appeal, and it was such a weak case, it was almost laughable, right? Which is why I understand how Andrew Bridgen feels, where he's just had to go through a directions hearing, right? And that they're coming out with absolute nonsense. And the point being is because they can. The King's Counsel involved with Matt Hancock is just one of them disgusting frauds, right? Just to make sure everyone's aware how strongly I believe that the legal situation in this country is so corrupted to the core, that you need to. And by the way, the only other person who dealt with the judiciary was Oliver Cromwell, right? I just want to make sure everyone understands that. Oliver Cromwell dealt with the crookedness of the judiciary, right? Push for video recording of every counting and table. They don't allow video recording, and there's a reason for it, because they know that the fraud itself will be recorded, right? Treat summary sheets with suspicion. The summary sheets are the ones where they do the other tally up and they say, yeah, everything tallies, right? Well, if you've done the swap inside the bundle, the tallies do look right. But the individual ballots inside them, they have been allocated to the wrong person, the wrong candidate, right? Underlying bundles were not independently verified. This technique defeats weak oversight even when total ballots cast match records. The fraud is in the reallocation. Exactly that. The fraud is in the reallocation, right? Not creation or destruction of ballots. It's in the reallocation. The reallocation, right? And sometimes, I mean, when you look at what happened in Batley and Spen with George Galloway, that was the most out. I mean, I was literally had steam coming out my ears at the end. And don't forget, I do not support the politics of George Galloway, right? But I see him there. I shook his hand and I said, "They've robbed you." I'm not suggesting he won, but he definitely come a close second, and that's not what they wanted people to see in the north, right? And there was an outrageous fraud there. And I said to the police who were standing there, "You have watched this fraud and allowed it to happen," right? Key message to broadcast: election integrity requires verifying every bundle, not just totals or the intermediary totals, which is what they've been doing. Basically, summary sheets, not just totals. This is why it's so important at the count, right? Vote swapping at the bundle level, hiding opposing votes in the middle, while padding the visible top bottom, right, is known physical counting fraud, right? Limited observers make it easy. So if the less observers you've got, so the more observers you've got, the better you get if you're going to capture this fraud, right? And I am telling everyone who's listening to this, right? I am a systems engineer. I understand fraud. There's nothing better for me as a if you want to describe me as an activist ex-offender. I hate banks, right? With a vengeance, right? But I know what they do and how they do it, right? That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the system. I'm looking for how they do it. The same as if I was working casino security, I'll be looking, if I knew someone was abnormally getting something on a table that they shouldn't be, I know he's at it. But what is he doing? And then you're watching and analysing to find how is he or she doing it, right? And it could be that they're in it with the croupier. It could be they're in it with the dealer. You don't know what the situation is. That's why there's cameras everywhere on every table in a casino, right? Where's the cameras on every table? Where's everyone being watched in that process? They keep the middle part of the process, the tally, the summarization, the final tally, the bundles. No one can see what's going on, right? Not fully. You need eyes in there, right? And the more eyes you've got, they must know we ain't tolerating this, and they must understand we will take this to an election petition court. Do you understand that, right? Now, we've already had a situation where Reform started bleating about the last one and about the post office throwing away their ballots. And the arguments they're using, right, are the same arguments, right? They've literally plagiarized what I've said in a previous case, in that case, right? They're disgusting. Reform are disgusting. Sarah Pouchin is a fraud, right? And people must know to get Rebecca elected, we have to back her, and we need to back Restore to stop the fraud, right? So again, just to make sure, it's known as physical counting fraud. Limited observers make it easy, demand real scrutiny, or the count cannot be trusted, right? Exactly that. This description is neutral, factual, and focused on a mechanism so parties, monitors, and the public know exactly what the vulnerability to watch for and mitigate.
The English Constitution is the solution, always has been and always will be.